Basketball superstar is about to sign a Nike endorsement deal worth $28 million.
A record-breaking Nike contract for $25 million was awaiting Caitlin Clark's signature. For most rookies, it would have been the simplest choice in their lives. However, Caitlin Clark had no interest in creating history by herself. She reportedly begged Nike for something surprising before agreeing to the biggest endorsement deal ever given to a female basketball player. A chance for Sophie Cunningham to be part of the journey. What transpired next transformed a commercial transaction into a tale of devotion, leadership, and those who support celebrities when no one else is around. Tonight, we learn about the incredible bond between Clark and Cunningham and why Caitlin Clark's true self was revealed by a single, straightforward request. Clark is on his way. How is she going to approach history? You must comprehend the environment that Caitlin Clark entered when she entered the WNBA, before Caitlin, after Caitlin, before we reached the Nike moment, before we reached the jersey, the shoebox, and the 30 seconds of stillness that no one in that room will ever forget. Because what she did with her bargain is just a lovely tale without that background. It transforms into something quite else. The financial realities of professional women's basketball in America was nearly a national embarrassment for the majority of the WNBA's existence. Veteran athletes and women who had dedicated 10, 12, or 15 years of their lives to the sport were receiving earnings that were insufficient to pay for housing in the cities where they participated. The average pay in the league was in the middle of 5 figures for.
The average salary for WNBA players moving forward will be around $600,000.
A top player's actual basketball contract could only pay her a maximum of about $250,000 annually. When compared to the NBA, where the minimum rookie deal approaches $1 million yearly, that seems like big money. And all of a sudden, you see the whole scene. They weren't merely basketball players. In order to make ends meet, they worked second jobs during the off-season. Some of them were high school coaches. In their hometowns, some were offering private training sessions. One of the league's most well-known young players, Angel Reese, openly stated that her WNBA paycheck was insufficient to pay her rent.
Basketball star Angel Reese says her WNBA salary does not cover her rent.
With her basketball salary, a professional player at the top level of her sport in the U.S. was unable to cover her rent. Go over that statement once more. Allow it to land. What then did they do? They boarded aircraft. They took flights to China, Turkey, Russia, Europe, and Australia. In order to make enough money to sustain their careers, they played in foreign leagues during the WNBA off-season, away from their families and in nations where they did not understand the language. Endorsement deals were uncommon back home. There were hardly any signature shoe contracts. The biggest stars in women's basketball were wearing sneakers bearing someone else's brand and making very little money from the businesses making money off of their prominence. Few women have ever had their own signature shoe in the 1997 founded WNBA. Candace Parker, Maya Moore, Elena Del Don, and Cheryl Swoops in 1995. Ionescu Sabrina in 2023. That's the whole list. However, the Sabrina 1, her first trademark sneaker, debuted in 2023. You can count the signature shoe athletes on one hand after almost 30 years of professional women's basketball. That was the terrain. The ceiling was that. Then Caitlin Clark showed up, and she didn't simply run into that ceiling. She passed right through it as if it were paper. Caitlin was chosen first overall by the Indiana Fever in the 2024 WNBA draft, which drew 2.45 million people watched. About 600,000 had been the previous record. Before she had played a single professional minute, she doubled the crowd for the draft alone. Indiana Fever season ticket sales increased by more than 1,000% as soon as her name was called. North Texas is about to experience the Caitlin Clark effect. Tickets to witness the collegiate basketball legend will go on sale in a matter of hours. In cities that had never seen an NBA game sold out in their franchise's history, road games were selling out. Products bearing her number were selling out more quickly than the league could replenish them. She wasn't a fad. She wasn't a passing craze that would go away in 3 months. All of the data from that first season led to the same indisputable conclusion. American women's professional basketball underwent a structural change thanks to Caitlin Clark. And the companies with the real money, the ones paying attention, were ready to take action. The Nike agreement, which shattered all previous records, fell with the kind of force that causes the entire industry to pause and reevaluate. $25 million over 8 years. According to reports, Caitlin Clark will join with Nike. The Wall Street Journal claims that the transaction is for $28 million spread over 8 years. An NBA record was broken, but it was completely destroyed by a signature shoe agreement. Sabrina Ionescu's deal with Nike, which was reportedly in the seven-figure area over several years, served as the prior benchmark. Not only was Caitlin's agreement greater, but it was much larger. NBA veterans were discreetly performing a double-take as they calculated their own early endorsement payouts. Furthermore, the number was not a gesture or an accident. The market was being honest about the impact Caitlin Clark had already had on women's basketball in less than a full season. However, while discussing this statistic, people occasionally overlook this. Caitlin Clark was not signed by Nike because of kindness. They wanted to make a significant contribution to women's sports, so they decided not to sign her. Because of the compelling and indisputable commercial reason, they signed her. Every arena she entered sold out weeks ahead of schedule. Ratings on television were doubling and occasionally quadrupling. Due to the record viewership for women's collegiate basketball, the WNBA season is highly anticipated. When the schedule showed her name, many of the young women and girls she was attracting to the sport had never seen a WNBA game before. Nike wasn't placing a wager on a player. Nike was placing a wager on change. They were placing a wager that the lady they were signing would soon redefine women's basketball's entire commercial ceiling. And that wager was right, as we now know. Take a moment to consider what that truly means. The WNBA draft in 2024 drew 2.45 million people watched. About 600,000 was the previous record. She didn't push the figure higher. Before she had played a single professional minute, she doubled it by 4. From the instant her name was called, Indiana Fever season ticket sales increased by more than 1,000%. Weeks before the fever struck, road arenas in cities that had never seen a WNBA game sold out were selling out. The quantity of stuff was unprecedented. In real time, the television contracts were being renegotiated. Every indicator the league monitored was speeding and going in a single direction. After considering all of that information, Nike made the only logical business choice at their disposal. This is the summit for the majority of athletes. This is the time when everything you have worked for since you were a child, shooting by yourself in a gym somewhere, finally shows up as a contract number. It is signed by you. The press tour is done by you. You ride the wave for as long as it lasts by allowing Nike to craft the ad around your face. No one would have questioned it. No one could have anticipated anything more from a player who was still considered a rookie. Oh, Caitlin Clark, crime in mule's face, rookie on rookie. She was still learning the league and taking criticism every night from players who felt she ought to be demoted before she became too at ease. Unlike other athletes, Caitlin Clark is unique. She has never been. As soon as the contract's ink dried, she began to consider what she would do with it, something that no one in the room had anticipated. The executives believed they understood what was about to happen. The reporters believed they knew what was about to happen. The whole thing had been planned with a particular conclusion in mind. They were all unaware that Caitlin had spent the weeks leading up to that evening having private discussions that would drastically alter the evening's conclusion. She had brought something unique to the negotiation, a second desire, a condition, a name. And to their great credit, Nike had agreed. Everything that followed was altered by that one word. The Nike event was intended to be a controlled experience from the moment the room fell silent. Pre-mapped camera settings, a printed guest list, and backstage talking points. Caitlin's journey from a half-empty gymnasium in Des Moines, Iowa, where she was already drawing audiences as a teenager, to her famous run at the University of Iowa, to the terrible beauty of her rookie NBA season, is chronicled in this short video. Caitlin, congratulations. The 2024 Kia WNBA rookie is you. Nothing was softened by the movie. It depicted the hard fouls, cheap shots, internet pylons, talking heads who felt she was overhyped, and the weariness of bearing the expectations of an entire league before she had thoroughly studied the playbook for her own squad. It then revealed the opposite side. The sold-out crowds that encircled city blocks, the buzzer beaters that shook arenas, and the little girls wearing her jersey who watched her play with their mouths wide and couldn't take their eyes off of her. A Nike executive entered the stage with the gold-stitched jersey as the movie came to a conclusion and the lights came back on. Phones emerged as the room leaned forward. Everyone had been waiting for this moment. The image that, by morning, would appear on every sports website. The jersey was taken by Caitlin. She held it and gazed at it for a moment longer than anyone in the room had anticipated. Then she turned away from the CEO and away from the cameras. She turned to face Sophie Cunningham, who was standing close by, and assumed she was there to offer moral support. Perhaps a background picture, a complimentary appetizer, and, at most, a glass of sparkling water. Every phrase had weight in Caitlin's calm voice. She claimed that while her plays are well known, Sophie's plays go unnoticed. Because of Mitchell, Sophie Cunningham does a fantastic job at drawing to him. There was no applause in the room. There was no cheering in the room. Nobody realized what was really happening, so the room became silent. A sleek black display cabinet was rolled onto the stage. Reaching inside, Caitlin took out a personalized shoe box. She didn't hold it in a position. She avoided turning it in the direction of the cameras. With a clear, purposeful intention, she walked it straight to Sophie and put it in her hands. Sophie cracked it open. There was a pair of specially made, player-only trainers within. Full Indiana Fever colors, hand-stitched with a line that summed up Sophie's whole persona as a player. Never give up. Sophie grinned as she ran her fingers over the stitching, thinking it was a lovely memento amongst colleagues. Then she noticed a folded page behind the tissue paper. The smile became into something else when she carefully unfolded it. When you realize that your life has suddenly transformed in a way for which you were unprepared, something takes over your face. It was Sophie's contract, not Caitlin's. Caitlin obtained a totally different Nike endorsement arrangement in exchange for signing her own contract. Caitlin Clark is anticipated to maintain her affiliation with Nike at lunchtime. Weeks before anyone in the room was aware of it, Caitlin Clark had sat across a table from Nike officials behind closed doors and made it clear that she would not sign her contract unless her teammate accompanied her. Nike had agreed. For about 30 seconds, Sophie remained silent while holding the package and the contract. Those who were present in the room that evening have described that hush as the point at which everyone in the room realized what they had just seen. It was not the polished corporate applause of a new introduction that finally broke through. It was the sound a room makes when it realizes it was only a part of something that will continue to be discussed long after everyone has forgotten what they had for dinner that evening. Why was Sophie Cunningham selected? You may be asking a straightforward question right now if you weren't paying close attention to Indiana Fever basketball during Caitlin's freshman campaign. Why, Sophie? Why did Sophie Cunningham receive the contract, the sneakers, and the stage moment out of all her teammates? This story's weight stems from the response to that question. Because Caitlin Clark's physical survival during her debut season is mostly due to Sophie Cunningham. Caitlin had a bullseye on her back from the first game she played in the WNBA. Not the kind of target that results from having skill or being selected first overall. The kind that results from being too noticeable, too well-liked, and too disruptive to a league that wasn't entirely ready for the shock of her presence. She was constantly being fouled. Referees ignored a hand check that ought to have been called. Extra elbows, extra force, and extra intent were being used to set screens against her. Contact was occurring later and at a higher level than allowed by the rulebook. Kennedy Carter's harsh foul early in the season made headlines around the country. Kennedy Carter hit a shot in the sky, then went to Clark and gave her a shoulder check. However, that was only the most noticeable instance of a pattern that persisted all year long. Multiple clubs were sending a clear message on the floor, the league was reactive, and the officials were inconsistent. Make it difficult for her. Make it tangible. Check to see if she eventually gives in to the pressure. To that message, Sophie Cunningham had a particular reaction. She started doing the work that never appears anywhere in a box score. She was making contact with her own body, letting every club in the league know that taking cheap shots on her colleague will have repercussions. When rival players approached Caitlin with malicious intent, she was walking straight into their faces. Players were hesitant to run Caitlin off a screen with their elbows up because she was the enforcer and the unwritten insurance policy. Sophie was present to ensure that a blatant foul did not occur again each time it went uncalled and the officials ignored it. Sophie intervened between Caitlin and whatever was about to happen in every altercation that erupted on the floor. The cameras weren't the reason she did this. In order to draw attention to her brand, she was not sharing highlights of her own toughness. She wasn't advocating for the time of the interview. She was performing the unseen, bone-rattling, unglamorous labor that enables a star athlete to perform at their best. Because she has always been a fierce competitor, she was doing it every single night. Returning to her time as a Missouri college student and her time with the Phoenix Mercury before to her trade to Indiana. Phoenix Mercury. Sophie Cunningham is here. DJ. Caitlin observed. Every time, she saw it. Since it is not her way, she did not openly discuss it during the season. She doesn't keep a journal in the media. However, she was listening. She was documenting every instance in which Sophie intervened, every cheap shot that Sophie took on her behalf, and every conflict that Sophie resolved before it got out of hand. Additionally, she was working on a secret project that no one was aware of. Caitlin brought more than just her agent and her numbers to the Nike deal. She introduced a name. Furthermore, she did not make a sentimental case for that name. It was straightforward. In the most challenging setting of her career, she was able to play her best basketball because to the guy she was going to explain. That individual was also deserving of a seat at the table. After hearing the reasoning, Nike concurred. Because a brand values authenticity, real, documented, verifiable loyalty between two people, more than anything a marketing team can create from the ground up. In the days following that occurrence, Nike had to make a decision on everything from mobility to shoe deals. Option 1. Treat the Sophie incident as a heartwarming tale, give it 48 hours to get traction on social media, and then carry out the initial solo rollout strategy. Option 2 is to fully commit and reconstruct the entire campaign based on what had genuinely transpired on that stage. It wasn't difficult for them to select option 2. The resulting campaign was based on a single concept that Nike has never used as the basis for a significant signature rollout. Collaboration outweighs individual fame. The slogan, "Built for each other," became the focal point of the entire launch. Using actual film from game days and fever practices, the quiet moments that TV cameras never capture, Nike created little documentaries. During warm-ups for away games, Sophie places herself between Caitlin and hostile spectators. Caitlin Clark is out on a daily basis due to an increasingly serious injury. Cunningham, 3 more. After practice, the two of them stay late to run pick-and-roll combinations one more time before heading home. Nothing about the way they smiled on the team bus following a difficult defeat was contrived. It was all true. It worked precisely because of that. Within hours of going live, co-branded products sold out. The Clark Cunningham drop was featured in full on sneaker blogs that have never reported on a WNBA release. Even before the sneakers were formally made accessible to the general public, resale values skyrocketed on secondary markets. Conversations that were previously limited to LeBron James and Kevin Durant launches were suddenly being driven by women's basketball products, which had previously been a complete afterthought in the sneaker market. For the first time in the company's history, Nike developed a significant hallmark campaign that focused on collective greatness rather than individual supremacy, and it was successful because it wasn't produced. It occurred as a result of a decision taken by a 22-year-old rookie that could not have been documented in a marketing meeting. As soon as they saw all of this, the other big sneaker companies began recalibrating. Under Armour, Adidas, Puma, and New Balance. In the months that followed, they all put more money into women's basketball. Suddenly, players on modest contracts were getting calls about contract